recognizing the risk to begin with, developing a more automated approach in order to both identify and then assess third parties at scale. That remains a mountain of work, and we can talk about some of the ways people are going about it.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our interview with Calle. Craig is the CEO of Source Calle LLC, a Philadelphia-based advisory firm that helps organizations select, implement, and manage products from its best-of-breed vendor partners in the cybersecurity, third-party risk, GRC, and privacy categories. And before starting his firm in 2015, he was a CHI International's Chief Strategic Officer. And he has been the Chief Financial Officer at Amazon.com, responsible for digital media, including Kindle, Audible, video, and music, and the North American books e-commerce business. So, Greg, welcome to our Risk Management Show podcast today.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Boris.
Absolutely. So with such a great experience, I believe that we will have a very thoughtful conversation on the topic of third-party risk management and cybersecurity. But before that, Greg, could you tell us a short story about yourself? What brought you to where you are right now, and what you're up to these days?
Sure. Well, as you were describing, my background really falls into three buckets. I started life as an investment banker, then became a CFO or treasurer at both public and private companies. And then the third chapter was in technology strategy and sales. So I was the chief strategy officer at SHI International. That's the second largest value-added reseller in North America. It's the largest Microsoft reseller. And about 8 years ago, I started my own firm, which is very different from SHI, which is maybe 14 billion of revenue. I'm focused on about 20 best-of-breed vendors in cybersecurity, third-party risk, GRC, and privacy. And so we tend to have a greater emphasis on emerging companies, typically venture-backed people that are coming up with new ideas, what I like to call novel yet proven. And so as a small firm, I focus on what I call the large, growing, yet still remarkably under-addressed set of vulnerabilities that are out there. And I think third-party risk is fraught with risk that we can do a much better job managing as an industry. So I'm happy to spend a few minutes with you here today, sharing some of my experiences, and hopefully that's of use to some of your listeners.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic, yeah. It's a lot of experience. So let's dive directly into the topic. So, what are the key challenges that organizations face when it comes to managing third-party risk in the realm of cybersecurity?
We've come a long way in the last 10 years in particular, really dating back to a pretty well-known breach that occurred at Target Corp, a large retailer. They were hacked, not directly, but through an insecure third party, a company called Fazio Mechanical Services, not necessarily a household name, but I think illustrates just how much work companies need to do to develop a comprehensive list of the vendors and other third parties that are in their community. We're still largely in a world where companies are trying to understand the risks associated with third parties using manual processes, largely Excel spreadsheet approaches that don't scale, considering the scope of the problem and as it's developed over the last 10 years. So I'd say, just recognizing the risk to begin with, developing a more automated approach in order to both identify and then assess third parties at scale. That remains a mountain of work, and we can talk about some of the ways people are going about it. But I'd say that remains sort of the core vulnerability that so many companies face from a cybersecurity standpoint, where more than half of breaches today come through insecure third parties.
Mm. So how can these businesses effectively prioritize third-party risk assessments amidst a landscape of evolving cyber threats and vulnerabilities? As we have seen a lot of kind of dashboards, a lot of different type of risks, and there's a small, some people say it's a big third-party risk. How people can prioritize this?
Yeah, well, I think again, it really starts with developing that list of third parties, and that's easier said than done. I think a common mistake I see a lot of companies, even large, seemingly sophisticated companies make, is that they'll get a list from procurement that's ranked by how much they spent last year, and then focus their attention on those, thinking that spend is an important determinant of risk. Whereas in fact, other factors are far more important, such as how much and of what type of data that third party might hold, and whether there's a connection between that third party and the host's network. One of the categories of third parties that I find are most underrepresented in inventories of third parties are cloud-based vendors, or what we might call software as a service or SaaS applications. There are over 50,000 of these out there that you might find in a company's environment, their network environment, and only 8% of those are what we would call enterprise ready. The rest can represent considerable risk, from a cybersecurity standpoint, from a privacy compliance standpoint, among other risks. And so, getting that comprehensive inventory is important, and then tiering them based on risk is an important step in the process. So moving beyond just easy to access data like spend by vendor to a more risk-based approach that factors in on the things that can cause cybersecurity, privacy compliance, and other risks.
Mm-hmm. All right. So what role does regulatory compliance play in shaping third-party risk management practices, and how do these regulations impact cyber strategy?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'd like to think that every organization would treat security and compliance as a strategic advantage. Those companies that can demonstrate that they operate with high levels of cyber hygiene are going to win the confidence of customers and prospects and gain market share. Sadly, I'd say regulation tends to be the most pronounced tailwind, driving sales of products in this and other categories within cybersecurity.
And can you share with us, Greg, what are some major trends and technology that are reshaping the landscape? Because you are dealing with a lot of this high-tech new vendors that just pop up. I think only if we look on the chart on the list of this third-party vendors, there are hundreds, maybe a few hundreds companies. So what are the trends?
Sure, that's a good question. Especially relevant for my firm, which helps organizations select, implement, and manage technology in this category. And so it's third-party risk is a particularly attractive practice area for my firm because, unlike some other categories of cybersecurity, there's no one single product that can solve this. It really, as we sometimes say here in the United States, it takes a village, to solve this problem. And it's not just the tools. It's probably even more important to focus on process and training and developing and training people, in this somewhat specialized area. But the tool set itself is varied, and so at the highest level, I tend to guide people through two elements from a tool standpoint, and that's the first would be what I would call a workflow automation platform. So a way to issue, review assessments, in the form of questionnaires and other assessments at scale. Be able to score the risk based on the responses, develop plans to mitigate risk so you can determine the difference between inherent risk and residual risk, and then create reports for various stakeholders. So those are sort of the table stakes of a workflow automation platform. There are many out there, names like LogicGate, BitSight, MetricStream, ServiceNow, Process Unity. The list is long and distinguished. The second core tool that you tend to find in mature third-party risk programs are cyber risk ratings. And those are names like BitSight, Security Scorecard, Black Kite, Risk Recon, and like. That's a category that's been around for 10 or 12 years now. Has moved into the mainstream from the standpoint of being able to continuously monitor the risk profile of a third party. And mind you, it's never meant to be a comprehensive risk. These are services that are looking at organizations just from the outside. So what are the different risk factors that can be assessed, from scans and other means, and then they reduce risk down to an easy to understand, numerical or letter grade score. And so that category of tool has helped, fill in the gaps from the workflow automation platforms that are typically designed to assess a third party every year or so through a questionnaire. But what they also allow you to do is align the questionnaire responses with the objective data that would cover various control aspects. And so you can essentially, trust, verify, and then trust the responses you're getting back from these questionnaires. Mind you, some, are over 1,000 questions. So sometimes even the responses themselves can be erroneous for one reason or another. And so it's a good way to call out discrepancies and further enrich that dialogue that you're going to have with a third party when it comes to security aspects. There are other types of risks, of course, and ratings firms have become established covering risks like financial viability, alignment of ESG, sanctions, privacy policies, geopolitical risks. So we're as an industry, we're moving from really more of a qualitative approach to assessing third parties to a decidedly more quantitative approach. Let me throw out a few other ideas, and you can react to them as you like. But when it comes to the tool set, I think you're sort of looking at what's new and developing and the like. And so, not surprisingly, you're seeing some new entrants in this field bring an artificial intelligence approach. So ways to cut through voluminous and numerous documents and cull out the meaningful information. Um, we're seeing the emergence of what are called trust centers, safe places to put your documents to better facilitate the exchange of them, so that we can rely more on completed artifacts rather than simply banging out, yet another questionnaire that inevitably contributes to what we call vendor fatigue. So there's some other developments, but I've put a lot on the table there for you to digest. I'll
Yeah.
let you tell me where you'd like to go.
Yeah, I think we as a global risk community, we have been working, we have some partners in this space, the Process Unity Metric Stream, one of the oldest partners. They post a lot of material on our site, and also they come in new ones. I think they're related mostly with ratings kind of, not on questionnaires, but on ratings and some data points stuff. But yeah, so it's very dynamic field, and but let's discuss how can organizations foster a culture of collaboration and accountability among internal teams and external partners to enhance this overall cybersecurity posture, just to understand how it can be, or everything can be put in place.
Um, one of the things I took out of your question is this notion of collaboration. Let me address that. Hopefully, I'm being responsive, because it's a really important point. When I come into a company, like any advisor, I dream of that opportunity to, take a clean sheet approach. But in practice, everyone has something that they're working with, and with varying success. Usually, I get involved when things aren't going quite as well. But one of the things I've noticed that I'd like to change is that when it comes to third party risk, there's a decided gravitational pull towards cyber risk, and for good reason, and nothing wrong with that, and it's certainly justifiable. But the notion of looking at third party risks in a more holistic manner certainly hangs together, but achieving that can be difficult. So, most of the third party risk programs I come across tend to be run by a chief information security officer, or CISO. Again, recognizing cyber as the dominant risk that people care about. But at the same time, there's somebody likely called a data privacy officer, who is mindful of the need to track data, not just from a standpoint of their own host organization, but how it's held and treated at a third party. So, data mapping is an important practice, and following that data out to third parties is a natural workflow that you would think would fit hand in glove with a cyber-oriented third-party risk management program. But sometimes privacy and cybersecurity don't collaborate as effectively as or at all. And so you find people picking sort of a single point solution to solve their particular issue. Perhaps it's somebody managing an ESG or sustainability program, and mind you, they've got their hands full just covering their own company. But with you being in Europe, I mean, you must know firsthand, the regulations that mandate, the coverage of practices within the third parties, and that trend, is increasingly expressed here in the United States. And so connecting ESG to cyber, to privacy, to a chief compliance officer who's worried about anti-money laundering or bribery, some of the other sanctions risks that are involved in third parties. It's a very big, complicated issue. I think regrettably that tends to be handled in too siloed approach. So that's an issue that the industry needs to continue to work on.
All right, awesome. So I would like to ask you, Greg, a personal point, your personal point of view. What are the
Mhm.
major misconception in the space of third-party risk or vendor risk that you strongly disagree with?
Hmm. Um, I I'm a big proponent that of trying to um, move move away from um, such a strong reliance on ever longer questionnaires to maybe where I think that we might be losing the forest for the trees, and try to make third party risk not so much of a rote exercise, but rather, connecting it more effectively, to the business relationship owner. I mean, I think today, we all these platforms that we've mentioned, are great at what they do. They certainly delineate risk, in incredibly fine detail, and create reports that get sent to business owners. But I'd like to see us maybe pull the function out from a more technical analytical sphere, and put the business owner more at the center of things. And I guess maybe related to that, and it's somewhat of, I think, of some of a novel suggestion here, is elevate the responsibility for third party risk to what I would call a chief third party officer. That's a role that doesn't exist today. Maybe there's someone out there that's assigned that title to them, but I think it's time that we elevate a practice that, frankly, sits more in a technical field, maybe at a director level, and have a lot of this, have all of this work orchestrated, by a C-level executive that I think would be appropriately called a chief third party officer. And this person isn't necessarily just focused on risk, mind you. It can be connected just as well to performance.
Mhm.
So there's a risk and reward aspect to it, a forehand and a backhand element to it, and that would really change the way this function operates. But I think it would end up making it far more effective as a result.
Great. So let's just summarize our interview. So if someone who is listening to this episode would like to walk away with one or two major takeaways, what would it be?
Um, well, I'd say that there are a lot of important catalysts for third-party risk management. We have an organizational bias toward horizontal integration. So another way of saying that is, we've come now 100 years since people marveled at the Henry Ford River Rouge complex, that was a model of vertical integration. Maybe taking it more to the present in the form of a book by Thomas Friedman, "The World is Flat." Um, we operate now in a very horizontal manner, and with that comes great opportunity, but great risk. In terms of understanding how well these third parties perform, and what risk do they represent to our organization. The second principle would be that principal catalyst is the rise of cloud computing. As I mentioned previously,
Hmm.
the most notoriously undercounted set of vendors and third parties that I've seen, comes from the community of SaaS apps and cloud hosts that people use, sometimes without IT even being aware of it, what we call through shadow IT, and these are inevitably uh, third parties that have a network connection, and therefore they become tier one and high priority. And the third, there are other things, but I'd say, again, referencing something you brought up, regulatory pressure, um, be it the different uh, here in the U.S. State regulations, like New York state financial regulations, that obligate organizations or banks to have a third-party practice. GDPR on the privacy side, and the various U.S. states that are adopting regulations that are somewhat comparable to GDPR also put an emphasis on third-party risk. And from the standards bodies, NIST just released its 2.0 release that emphasizes this similar need. This also follows a period of great supply chain disruption that we haven't talked about, which is also an important catalyst to marshaling your efforts around third-party risk. So some huge catalysts out there. Some really great work being done by vendors in a variety of categories. It's an exciting area that has still a huge amount of potential, especially as we see organizations move from manual Excel-based approaches to much more scalable approaches, so we can really get our arms around this problem.
All right, fantastic. That's why all my questions. Perhaps if I forgot to ask you any question that you would think would be beneficial for our audience, please go ahead.
I'm sorry, say that again.
If I forgot to ask you anything that you would like that I'd ask you, you can go answer this question if I forgot to ask you something.
Oh, I see.
That is important.
Well, that's the opportunity for a self-plug, I suppose.
Yeah,
so,
whatever.
Yeah, no, I'd invite people to go to my website, www.sourcecalle.com. So that's sourcecalle.com. It's describes the dozen different practice areas we have, but I'd say third-party risk is probably the largest of those areas, and certainly welcome inquiries and good discussion with anyone who's interested.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And you're welcome to join our site at globalriskcommunity.com and post your thought leadership. And we certainly will inform you and post your content in a few weeks.
Great. I look forward to it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.